There is a name in this city that people do not say out loud. Not because they don't know it. Because they know exactly what it means. Luke Jean. He doesn't walk into a room. He arrives. And when he does, the people who were laughing a second ago go quiet. The ones who were confident look at the floor. Not because he threatens them. Because they already know what he is capable of. And they have seen enough to never forget it. He is not a man you cross. He is not a man you ignore. He is the kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice. It just sits in the room, and everything else adjusts around it. Now picture a completely different world. Glass towers. Conference rooms. A woman standing at the head of a table full of men who earned their seats the easy way, and she earned hers by fighting through every single one of them. Her name is Shinraya. She is a CEO. She built her company from nothing, while her mother was sick, while the money was gone, while everyone around her was counting down to the day she would fall. She didn't fall. She stood up harder. To the business world, Raya is untouchable. Composed. Ruthless when she needs to be. A woman who does not need saving and has never once asked for it. These are two people who should never be in the same room. But here is what nobody in Raya's world knows. What nobody in Luke's world would ever believe. When the boardroom lights go dark and the CEO disappears, she doesn't go home to an empty penthouse. She gets into a car with tinted windows. She rides across the city to a building that isn't on any public record. She walks through a door that no one else in the world is allowed to open. And on the other side of it, the most dangerous man alive is already there. Waiting. Not with a weapon. Not with a threat. He is sitting on the floor. Unlacing her shoes. Looking up at her, like she is the only real thing in his entire life. Shinraya is not just connected to Luke Jean. She is his wife. And he would burn this entire city down to keep that secret. But secrets this big don't stay buried forever. And the people who want to destroy them, they are already watching. Raya saw the number before she understood what it meant. 14 missed calls from her CFO. 2 from the bank. 1 from a number she did not recognize but which, when she called back, connected to a man who spoke in a low, careful voice and told her that someone had just moved against Meridian Tech from the inside. He did not say who. He did not have to. By the time she hung up, she already knew. Leo Jean had been sloppy. That was the word Luke used later, in the dark, sitting on the edge of their bed with his sleeves rolled to his elbows and his jaw locked in that way it did when he was furious but would not raise his voice. Sloppy. A deal Leo had brokered without authorization. A shipment routed through a port that Meridian's logistics division used for legitimate contracts. Had drawn attention. The wrong kind. Federal attention. And the trail led straight back to a subsidiary that shared a financial fingerprint with Raya's company. She sat across from him, still in her work clothes, her hands wrapped around a glass of water she had not touched. The penthouse was quiet in the way it always was at this hour. Sealed off, warm, the city reduced to a distant hum behind soundproof glass. But the quiet felt different tonight. It felt like a held breath. "How bad?" she asked. Luke did not look away from her. "Bad enough that your board will hear about it before morning. Bad enough that Leo knows exactly what he did, and he doesn't care." Raya set the glass down. Her mind was already sorting board members, legal exposure, the quarterly review that was 3 weeks away. The CEO in her was calculating damage. But underneath that, in a place she had spent 3 years learning to ignore, something colder was settling in. Leo had not stumbled into this. He had stepped on it. Deliberately. Because the one thing that connected Meridian Tech to the Jean name was not a port contract or a logistics error. It was her. And Leo Jean had been looking for a way to make that connection visible for months. "What about my mother?" The question came out quieter than she intended. Luke's expression did not change. But his hand moved, slow, deliberate, across the space between them, and his fingers closed around hers. Not gently. Firmly. The way he held things he refused to let go of. "I already have someone on it," he said. "She is not alone. Raya looked at him, at the man the city feared, sitting in soft lamplight with his shirt open at the collar and his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with business. She wanted to believe him. She did believe him. But for the first time in 3 years, the two halves of her life had touched, and the ground beneath both of them had shifted. The clock was ticking now. And there was no going back to the way it was before. The meeting was supposed to be routine. A quarterly review of Gene Holdings' legitimate operations, the kind of gathering Luke held once a month in the lower conference room of the Ashford building, with a handful of people who knew enough to be useful and not enough to be dangerous. Raya had been invited. Not as his wife. As the CEO of Meridian Tech, whose contracts made up a significant portion of the portfolio's clean revenue. She sat at the far end of the table, tablet open, posture straight. She belonged here on paper. She had earned every seat she had ever occupied. But the moment Leo walked in, the room changed. He didn't look at Luke first. He looked at her. Leo Jean was not a tall man, but he carried himself like someone who had decided, long ago, that size did not matter as long as the room was paying attention. He dropped into a chair 2 seats from Raya without greeting anyone and poured himself a drink from the bottle on the table as though the meeting had been called for his convenience alone. His eyes stayed on her the entire time. Not curious. Appraising. The way someone looks at a piece of furniture they are deciding whether to remove. Still letting her sit at the table, brother? Leo said it casually. Not to Raya. To Luke. But the words were aimed like a blade, clean, angled, designed to land in front of everyone in the room. I keep waiting for her to say something useful. So far, nothing. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Every person at the table felt the weight of it pressing down, the 2 Jean brothers and the woman between them, and the question that none of them were allowed to ask out loud. Raya did not flinch. She did not look up from her tablet. She had been in boardrooms her entire life. She knew what a man like Leo wanted, a reaction. She did not give him one. But Luke did. He didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. He simply turned his head, slowly, and fixed Leo with the kind of look that had ended arguments in rooms far darker than this one. When he spoke, it was one sentence. Low. Even. Absolute. Leave. Leo held his gaze for 3 seconds longer than anyone else in that room would have dared. Then he laughed, short, dry, unconvinced, and stood up, adjusting his jacket as though the whole exchange had bored him. He paused at the door. Dad sends his regards, he said, without turning around. Then he was gone. The meeting continued. No one mentioned it. But 3 floors above them, in an office with no nameplate on the door, Thomas Jean was watching the security feed. He did not pause it. He did not rewind. He simply watched the way Luke's jaw had set when Leo spoke, the way his hand had moved, almost imperceptibly, toward the edge of the table, as though steadying himself against something pulling him forward. Thomas had seen that look before. On Luke's mother. Right before everything fell apart. He turned off the screen and sat in the quiet for a long time. The Jean estate was not a home. It was a statement. Stone walls, manicured gardens that no one used, rooms large enough to swallow sound. Thomas Jean had lived there for 30 years and had never once made it warm. Warmth, Raya had learned, was not something Thomas Jean understood. It was something he identified as a weakness in other people and filed away for later. The dinner was small. Thomas at the head. Luke to his right. Raya beside Luke, back straight, hands folded in her lap the way she sat in board meetings when she was listening for the thing no one wanted to say. Leo was not there. His absence was louder than his presence would have been. Thomas ate slowly. Precisely. He did not look at Raya for the first 20 minutes. He did not need to. When he finally spoke, it was to Luke, and it was about numbers, revenue projections, a restructuring of the family's legitimate holdings. Clean language. The kind of conversation that sounded, to anyone listening without context, like a father discussing business with his son. But Raya heard the shape underneath it. The restructuring Thomas was describing would require new leadership at Meridian Tech. Someone with deeper ties to the Gene network. Someone who was not her. She did not react. She kept her face the way she kept it in every room where men tried to move her without her knowing. Still. Watchful. Waiting. Luke heard it too. She felt the shift in him, a tightening, subtle and controlled, the way a wire goes taut before it snaps. But he did not interrupt. He did not challenge. He simply set down his fork, dabbed the corner of his mouth with a napkin, and said, "We will discuss it." Thomas smiled. It was a small smile. The kind that meant he had already won. They left before dessert. Luke drove. Neither of them spoke until they were 10 minutes from the city, the estate swallowed by distance behind them. Then Raya said, very quietly, "He already has the votes." Luke did not deny it. His hand stayed on the wheel, steady, and his silence was its own answer. What Raya did not know, what she would not learn until much later, was what happened after they left. Thomas did not stay at the table. He drove to the clinic where Lily Shen was being treated. It was late. The halls were dim. He found her room without asking for directions, and he sat in the chair beside her bed with the patience of a man who had spent decades waiting for the right moment to speak. Lily was awake. Tired. But awake. She looked at Thomas the way a woman looks at someone she has seen before but cannot quite place, not fear. Not yet. Just uncertainty. "Your daughter," Thomas said, folding his hands in his lap. "Do you know who she married?" He did not wait for the answer. He simply began to talk. Slowly. Gently. The way someone fills a glass of water, drop by drop, until the glass is full and the person holding it does not remember it was ever empty. The Pacific Investors Summit was the kind of event Raya had spent years working toward. 3 days. The sharpest money in the region in one building. And Meridian Tech was on the agenda, not as a footnote, but as one of the evening's featured presentations. She had earned that slot. She had fought for it quarter by quarter, relationship by relationship, until her name carried enough weight to open doors on its own. The first evening went smoothly. Raya moved through the room the way she always did, precise, unhurried, letting her work speak before she did. Investors listened. A few asked questions that mattered. She answered them cleanly. By the end of the reception, 2 separate firms had requested follow-up meetings. She allowed herself, for one quiet moment in the elevator afterward, to feel something close to relief. It did not last. The second morning, a man named Harlan Voss took the stage. Raya had seen his name before, a mid-tier investor with a sharp reputation and sharper suits. She did not know, at the time, that his firm had received a quiet capital injection 6 months earlier from a shell company that traced, through 3 layers of intermediaries, back to Thomas Jean. Voss did not mention the Jean name. He did not need to. He simply stood at the podium and began to talk about Meridian Tech's financial exposure, specific numbers, specific risk factors, delivered with the calm authority of someone who had done his homework. The audience leaned in. By the time Voss stepped down, the damage was clean and public and impossible to dismiss without looking desperate. Raya sat in the 3rd row and did not move. She had seen this before, the careful disassembly of a reputation, performed in daylight, with polite language and source data. She recognized the architecture of it. What she could not do was name the hand that built it. Not here. Not in this room. Because the hand belonged to a world she had spent 3 years convincing herself she did not inhabit. Across the lobby, on a balcony above the main floor, Luke watched. He had not come for the summit. He had come because he had known, 2 days before Voss was scheduled to speak, exactly what was going to happen. He had received the information through channels Raya did not know existed. And he had done nothing. Not because he did not want to. Because intervening meant stepping into the light. And the light was the one place Luke Jean could not afford to stand. He left before the afternoon session ended. That night, while Raya was still at the summit, fielding calls from her legal team and drafting a response that would not come soon enough, Leo Jean drove to the clinic. He did not go inside. He sat in his car in the parking structure for 40 minutes, engine off, watching the entrance. At 9:47, a nurse wheeled Lily Shen into the corridor near the window for her evening walk. Leo watched her pass, slow, fragile, unaware of who was looking. Then he picked up his phone and sent one message. To Thomas. 2 words. She's alone. The charity gala was Raya's idea. A way to rebuild credibility after the summit, not through arguments or press releases, but through visibility. Through standing in a room full of the people who mattered and reminding them, quietly, who she was. She wore a dark dress. She smiled when she needed to smile. She worked the room the way she always did, with precision, without pretense. For the first 2 hours, it worked. Leo found her near the back terrace, where the noise of the event thinned and the city opened up below the railing. She heard him before she saw him, the uneven rhythm of someone who had been drinking too long, the slight drag of a heel on stone. He came to stand beside her, not next to her. Close enough that his shoulder almost touched hers. Close enough to make a point. "Nice night for it," he said. His voice was loose. Slurred at the edges, but his eyes were sharp. He had been drinking, but he was not drunk. He was performing it. Raya did not turn her head. "What do you want, Leo?" He laughed. A short, ugly sound. "I want to know how long you thought you could keep it going." He turned to face her, and the pretense dropped. "I know, Raya. I know what you are to him. And I know what that makes you to this family." The air went cold. Not from the night. From the way Leo said it, like a door being opened onto something he had been standing behind for a long time. Raya kept her voice even. "You don't know anything." His wife. Leo said the words like they tasted wrong in his mouth. The Mafia Boss's secret wife. Hiding in plain sight in a boardroom. He stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what happens when people find out? Do you have any idea what happens to your mother?" He shoved her. Not hard enough to make her fall. Hard enough to make her stumble, hard enough to make it real. Raya caught herself on the railing, her knuckles white, and for a single second the composure she had built her entire life on cracked open. Not with fear. With fury. She did not see Luke arrive. No one did. He moved the way he always moved, without sound, without warning. One moment Leo was standing. The next, Luke's hand was around the back of his neck, and Leo was on the ground. What followed was not a fight. A fight implies two people trying to win. This was one-sided and fast and savage in a way that made the two security guards who reached them hesitate before intervening. Luke hit Leo twice. That was enough. Leo did not get back up. Luke straightened. He did not check his knuckles. He did not look at the people who had stopped to watch. He looked at Raya, only at Raya, and something passed between them that had no words. Then he took her hand and walked her inside, past the crowd, past the whispers, without slowing down. Across the terrace, a phone lowered. Thomas Jin's security chief sent one photograph to his employer. Luke's hand around Leo's neck. The way he had not hesitated. The way he had not looked at anyone else in the world. Thomas studied the image for a long time. Then he set the phone down and picked up a different one. Luke did not ask. He told her. A safe house upstate, small, unremarkable, the kind of place no one looked twice at. He drove her there himself, in the early hours before dawn, and the silence in the car was not the comfortable kind. It was the silence of two people who understood that something had just shifted, permanently, and that the life they had built in the quiet was no longer quiet. Before she got out of the car, he held her hand. Not gently. The same grip as before, firm, deliberate. A man refusing to let go of something the world was trying to take. "A few days," he said. "That is all I need." Raya nodded. She did not say what she was thinking, that a few days had never been enough for anything in the Jin family. She walked inside and heard the lock engage behind her. Luke moved fast after that. Faster than Thomas expected. He began cutting threads, quietly, surgically, the way a surgeon removes something without opening the patient wider than necessary. Financial channels that Thomas had used to funnel money through the family's legitimate holdings were frozen. Two intermediaries who had been reporting to Leo were removed from their positions before noon. A lawyer Thomas had relied on for 15 years found his retainer terminated by end of day. Each move was small on its own. Together, they were a net tightening around Thomas Jin's network, and Thomas felt every one. He responded the same afternoon. The emergency board meeting at Meridian Tech was called at 2 p.m., an extraordinary session, convened by 3 board members Raya had worked alongside for years. She did not know that Thomas had been paying 2 of them for the better part of 18 months. The agenda was simple, a vote of no confidence in the CEO, citing the financial exposure raised at the summit and the reputational damage that had followed. The vote was not close. By 3:15, Meridian Tech had a new interim chairman. Raya's name was removed from the company she had built from nothing. At the same hour, a story broke. Not in the press, not yet. On the networks that mattered. The kind of channels where information moved like smoke, invisible until it filled a room. The story was simple. Luke Jean was finalizing a marriage alliance with the daughter of a rival syndicate's legitimate arm. A strategic union. A consolidation of power. The kind of move that made sense, if you understood how the world Luke inhabited actually worked. It was fabricated. Every word. But it was fabricated well, with enough texture, enough sourcing, enough silence in the right places to feel true. Raya saw it on her phone at 4 p.m. She was sitting on the edge of a narrow bed in a house she did not recognize, in a room that smelled like nothing, and the screen glowed in the gray afternoon light. She read it twice. Then she set the phone face down on the mattress and stared at the wall for a long time. She did not call Luke. She did not need to. The doubt had already found the crack it was looking for, the one place where trust was not yet bone deep, where the weight of 3 years of secrets had worn something thin. It settled in quietly. The way Thomas Jean did everything. She drove back at night. No one knew. The safe house had no alarms, no tracker on the car. Luke had trusted her to stay. She did not stay. The doubt had been sitting in her chest for 2 days, growing heavier with each hour of silence, and by the time the sun went down on the second day it had become something she could not breathe around. She needed answers. She needed to look him in the eye and hear them. The penthouse door did not open. She tried her key twice. The lock had been changed, not by Luke. By someone protecting him. Or protecting her. She stood in the corridor for a full minute, her hand on the handle, before the elevator behind her opened and Luke's assistant stepped out with a look on his face that told her he had been waiting. "He told me you might come," the assistant said. "The locks are for your safety. There are people looking for you." Raya did not ask where Luke was. Her phone buzzed before she could. Her mother's number. She answered, and the sound that came through the line was not a voice. It was the end of one, ragged, broken, barely held together. "He did this to us," Lily said. "He made me sign things. He told me what would happen if I didn't. Raya, you have to leave him. He is not what you think he is." Raya closed her eyes. The corridor was cold. The city hummed somewhere below her, indifferent. "Mom. Slow down. What are you talking about?" "The marriage. He forced it. He has a video of me, something from years ago, and he said if I ever told anyone, he would destroy us. All of it." Lily's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Raya." She hung up without saying goodbye. Her hands were shaking. Not from the cold. She found Luke at the office, the Ashford building, the same conference room where Leo had been dismissed weeks before. He was alone. Sleeves rolled. Eyes already on the door when she walked in, as though he had known the exact moment she would arrive. She did not sit down. "Did you blackmail my mother?" The words landed in the quiet room like something dropped from a height. Luke did not look away. He did not defend himself. He simply held her gaze for a long moment, long enough for the silence to become its own answer, and then he stood up and walked to the safe behind his desk. He did not hand her a denial. He handed her a tablet. The video on the screen was not of Lily being threatened. It was of Lily in a room Raya did not recognize, receiving an envelope from a man she had never seen. The date stamp was 7 years old. Thomas Jin's voice came from off-screen, calm and instructional, walking Lily through what to say, and to whom, when the time came. It was not blackmail. It was a setup. Thomas had been building this moment for years, shaping Lily into the weapon he needed, waiting for the right hour to fire it. "She is not being blackmailed by me," Luke said. His voice was quiet, stripped of everything except the fact. "She has been used by him. For a long time. And I married you to get you away from it." Raya set the tablet down. Her legs did not feel solid. She sat, slowly, in the nearest chair, and stared at the floor while the full shape of it assembled itself in her mind. Thomas, patient and precise, building a cage around her mother long before Raya ever walked into it. The man who destroyed her family was never the man she married. He was the man who had been watching from the beginning. The package arrived at 6 a.m. No return address. No courier company logo. It had been left at the door of the Ashford building by hand, sometime in the hours before dawn, and the security desk had flagged it only because of the name written on the front in handwriting Raya recognized immediately. Her mother's. She opened it in Luke's office, still in the clothes she had slept in. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, old, water-stained at the edges, the kind of thing someone had kept hidden for a very long time. Beside it, a flash drive. And beneath both, a single sheet of paper, folded once, written in Lily's hand. The ink was unsteady. The words were not. I remember now. I am sorry it took me so long. Do not trust Thomas. Give this to Luke. It belongs to him. Raya read it twice. Then she picked up the phone. Luke arrived in 12 minutes. He did not sit down. He took the notebook from her hands and opened it, and for the first time since she had known him, she watched something move across his face that he did not control. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved fast across the pages, scanning, not reading. He already knew what was there. He had been looking for it for years. This is it, he said. His voice was low. Not calm. Controlled. The way it sounded when he was holding something back with everything he had. This is all of it. He plugged the flash drive into his laptop. The files loaded in seconds, financial records stretching back 2 decades, spreadsheets with entries that did not match any public filing Thomas Jean had ever made. Voice memos. Thomas's own voice, recorded and timestamped, giving instructions to move money, bury transactions, redirect funds away from the family's legitimate holdings and into accounts that existed only on paper. And beneath all of it, one document that made Luke go still. A legal charter. The original. Signed by Thomas's own father, Luke's grandfather, and dated 31 years ago. It named Luke's mother as co-trustee of the Jean family holdings. Thomas had buried it. For 3 decades, he had buried it, and it had sat in Lily Shin's possession the entire time, placed there, Raya understood now, by someone in the family who had known what Thomas was and had hidden the proof where he would never think to look. He framed her. Luke said. He was not talking to Raya. He was talking to the document. To his mother's name on it, written in ink that had not faded. He took everything from her and then he made sure no one would ever believe she had it. Raya looked at the clock. 7:42 a.m. The emergency board vote at Meridian Tech was scheduled for 9 o'clock. The vote that would formally seal the takeover Thomas had engineered. The vote that would end her company and cement his control over everything she had built. She looked at Luke. He was already closing the laptop, already reaching for his jacket. His face had shifted, the grief pushed down, locked away in the place where he kept everything that could not afford to be seen. What remained was something sharper. Something that had been waiting a long time to move. 1 hour. Raya said. Luke met her eyes. 1 hour, he said. That is all we need. They did not make it out of the building cleanly. Leo was waiting in the garage, not alone. 2 men behind him, positioned at the only exit that led to the street. He had known they were coming. Thomas had told him exactly what the package contained, and exactly where Luke and Raya would go with it. Hand it over, Leo said. He was sober this time. His voice was flat, stripped of the performance he had been putting on for weeks. This was the real Leo, not the drunk half-brother at a gala, not the smirking presence in a conference room. This was a man who understood exactly what was at stake and had chosen his side a long time ago. Luke set the bag down. Slowly. Then he moved. It was not clean. It was not fast. Leo was not small and the men behind him were not afraid. Luke took a hit to the ribs that drove the air out of him, and another across the jaw that split his lip open against his teeth. But he did not stop. He fought the way the city had taught him to fight, without rules, without restraint, with the kind of focus that comes from knowing exactly what you are protecting and what you will lose if you don't. Leo went down first. One of the others followed. The second held longer, but not long enough. By the time security arrived, Luke was leaning against a concrete pillar, blood on his shirt, one hand pressed against his side. Raya had already picked up the bag. She had not looked away from the fight. She had not flinched. She had simply waited, and the moment it was over, she was moving. "Can you drive?" she asked. He pushed off the pillar. "Get in." They crossed the city in 22 minutes. Luke drove with one hand, the other pressed against his ribs, running 2 red lights and cutting through a service alley behind a hotel that should not have fit the car but somehow did. Raya did not speak. She held the bag against her chest and watched the buildings blur past and did not think about anything except the room they were driving toward. The Meridian Tech boardroom was already in session when they arrived. Raya could hear the voices through the closed doors, measured, procedural, the careful language of men dismantling something they had been paid to dismantle. She did not knock. The doors opened and the room went silent. Every head turned. Thomas Jean was at the far end of the table, seated beside the interim chairman he had installed, a glass of water in front of him and an expression of mild, practiced surprise on his face. He had not expected them here. That was the first crack in his composure, small, but visible, the way a hairline fracture shows itself before anything breaks. Raya walked in. Not behind Luke. Beside him. Her back was straight. Her face was the face she wore in every boardroom she had ever entered, composed, precise, giving nothing away until she was ready to give everything. She set the bag on the table. She opened it. She did not look at Thomas when she spoke. She looked at the board. "Before you vote," she said, "you should see this." The flash drive slid across the mahogany surface and stopped in front of the lead investor. The notebook followed. The charter last, placed down with the care of someone handling something that had been buried for 30 years and was finally seeing light. No one moved for 3 seconds. Then someone plugged in the drive. The files loaded. The room read. Thomas Jean did not speak. He did not stand. He sat in his chair and watched the faces around the table shift, watched the moment his name changed from something that commanded silence to something that would end careers, and he said nothing at all. There was nothing left to say. The police arrived 11 minutes later. Thomas did not resist. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked out with the same quiet precision he had used his entire life. He did not look at Luke. He did not look at Raya. He looked at the floor, and he kept walking, and the door closed behind him, and the room exhaled. It was quiet for a long time after that. The board members spoke in low voices. Someone called legal. Someone else called the press, because the press was going to find out regardless, and it was better to control the shape of it. Luke was leaning against the wall near the door, his ribs wrapped now with a cloth Raya had found in the garage. His lip had stopped bleeding but the blood on his shirt had not dried. He looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than the fight, the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying something for years and finally setting it down. Raya walked over to him. She did not say anything. She simply stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, and looked out at the room full of people who were only now beginning to understand what they had been part of. Then Luke spoke. Not loudly. Not for the room. But the room heard it, because the room had gone quiet, and because what he said was the one thing he had kept locked for 3 years. She is my wife. He did not reach for her hand. He did not make a gesture. He simply said it, plainly, the way you state something that has always been true and is only now being allowed to exist out loud. Raya looked at him. He looked at her. And for the first time in the story of them, there was nothing between them and the world. The hidden union was no longer hidden.